The mahogany conference table stretched between Sarah Chen and her fate like a chasm. At 28, she had climbed higher in corporate finance than most people, twice her age. But sitting across from CEO Marcus Whitmore's cold gray eyes, she felt every bit the young woman who had started as an intern just 6 years ago. Sarah, Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came with running Pinnacle Industries. We need to discuss your compensation. The words hit her like ice water. Sarah's hands remained steady on the leather portfolio in her lap, though her heart began to race. She had just closed the Morrison deal, a $50 million acquisition that would boost Pinnacle's quarterly numbers by 12%. The bonus alone should have been substantial. I'm listening, she said, keeping her voice level. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Seattle skyline, gray clouds gathering like an omen. Your salary is being adjusted. Effective immediately, you'll be taking a 75% reduction. The number hung in the air like a physical blow. Sarah's $180,000 salary would drop to $45,000, barely enough to cover her mortgage, let alone her other expenses. I don't understand, she managed, though she understood perfectly. This was punishment disguised as corporate restructuring. You need to learn humility, Sarah. You've become ... overconfident, entitled. Even Marcus's fingers drummed against the table. This adjustment will help you remember your place in the company hierarchy. Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks, but she forced herself to remain calm. Around the table, the other executives, all men, all older, watched with expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly satisfied. VP of Operations Jim Bradley actually looked pleased. My performance reviews have been exemplary, Sarah said. The Morrison deal was a team effort, Marcus interrupted. Something you seem to have forgotten. Perhaps when you're earning what you're actually worth, you'll develop some appreciation for teamwork. Sarah's mind raced through her options. She could fight this, file complaints with HR, even consider legal action. But Marcus Whitmore had built Pinnacle Industries from the ground up over 15 years. He had connections, resources, and most importantly, he held all the power. I see. Sarah closed her portfolio and stood. I assume you'll want my projects transitioned. Jim will handle the Morrison integration, Marcus said dismissively. You can assist him as needed. The insult cut deep. Jim Bradley had opposed the Morrison acquisition from the beginning, calling it risky and aggressive. Now, he would get credit for her work while she served as his assistant. Of course, Sarah said. She turned toward the door, then paused. Marcus, yes, thank you for the lesson in humility. I have a feeling it's going to be very ... educational. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps even concerned, but Sarah was already walking away, her heels clicking against the marble floor with quiet determination. 3 weeks into her salary cut, Sarah sat in her cramped studio apartment, surrounded by financial documents that painted a grim picture. Her savings were draining fast, and pride wouldn't pay the bills. But pride also wouldn't let her quit. Instead, she had spent every evening researching Pinnacle Industries with the thoroughness that had made her so valuable to the company. What she discovered made her blood run cold and her heart race with possibility. Pinnacle was leveraged to the hilt. Marcus had been aggressive in his expansion, taking on debt to finance acquisitions and new projects. The company's debt-to-equity ratio was precarious, held together by strong cash flow and Marcus's reputation. But debt had a funny way of changing hands. Sarah picked up her phone and dialed the number she had memorized. Blackstone Recovery Services, came the gravelly voice of David Kim, a debt collection specialist she had worked with on the Morrison deal. David, it's Sarah Chen. I have a proposition for you. Sarah, how's life in the corporate fast lane? About to get interesting. Are you familiar with Pinnacle Industries' debt structure? A pause. Should I be? They have $200 million in outstanding loans across 12 different lenders. Most of it's performing debt, but some of those lenders might be motivated to sell at a discount, especially if they knew someone was interested in consolidating the position. David's voice sharpened with interest. What kind of discount are we talking about? That depends on how motivated they are, and how good you are at making them motivated. This wouldn't have anything to do with your boss cutting your salary, would it? Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. David, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm simply interested in making some strategic investments. And you have the capital for this kind of operation. I have something better. I have information. What do you think will happen next? Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. Sarah's grandmother had always said that patience was a weapon if you knew how to wield it. Over the next month, Sarah wielded it like a master SWORDSMAN. At Pinnacle, she played the role of the humbled employee perfectly. She arrived early, stayed late, and deferred to Jim Bradley even when he made decisions that made her teeth ache. She took notes in meetings where she used to lead discussions, and she smiled politely when Marcus made comments about her improved attitude. But outside the office, Sarah was building something else entirely. Her first stop was Janet Morrison, the CFO of Morrison Industries, the company Sarah had helped Pinnacle acquire. Janet had been forced out in the integration, another casualty of corporate consolidation. Sarah, Janet's voice carried surprise when she answered the phone. I heard about your situation. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry yet, Sarah said. I'm calling because I have an opportunity that might interest both of us. Are you free for coffee? They met at a small cafe in Pike Place Market, far from Pinnacle's downtown offices. Janet looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from fighting battles you couldn't win. Marcus Whitmore is a bastard, Janet said without preamble. He promised I'd have a role in the merged company, then pushed me out the moment the ink was dry. I know, and I'm going to make him pay for it. Sarah leaned forward. How much of your severance package did you take as cash versus stock options? All cash. I didn't trust Pinnacle's long-term prospects. Janet's eyes sharpened. Why? Because I need investors for a very specific kind of investment. And I think you might be interested in seeing Marcus get exactly what he deserves. Sarah outlined her plan, watching Janet's expression change from skepticism to amazement to something approaching glee. You want to buy his debt and foreclose on him. I want to give him a lesson in humility he'll never forget. Janet was quiet for a long moment, then smiled a fierce, predatory expression. How much do you need? Within 2 weeks, Sarah had assembled a war chest of $8 million from 4 investors, all of them people who had been burned by Marcus Whitmore in one way or another. Janet Morrison contributed $3 million. Former Pinnacle executive Tom Rodriguez, forced out after questioning one of Marcus's acquisitions, added $2 million. 2 smaller investors who had lost money on Pinnacle deals rounded out the fund, but money was only part of the equation. Sarah needed intelligence, and she had cultivated sources throughout the financial community during her years at Pinnacle. Regional Bank is nervous about their Pinnacle exposure, her contact at the bank told her over lunch. The loan is performing, but they're looking to reduce their real estate portfolio concentration. What would it take to motivate them to sell? A cash offer at 85 cents on the dollar would get their attention. They've got $15 million outstanding. Sarah made the calculation in her head. $12.75 million for $15 million in debt. It was expensive, but it was leverage. Set up a meeting, she said. The first domino fell 3 days later. Regional Bank agreed to sell Pinnacle's debt to Chen Investment Holdings, a newly formed LLC that existed solely to collect corporate debt. Sarah's lawyer had structured it carefully, ensuring that her name appeared nowhere in the public documents. The second domino was harder. First National held $25 million in Pinnacle debt, and they weren't motivated to sell. But Sarah had learned that their loan officer, Patricia Wells, was facing pressure from regulators over the bank's risk concentration. Ms. Wells, Sarah said, during a carefully orchestrated chance encounter at a banking conference, I couldn't help but notice your presentation on risk management. Very insightful. Patricia smiled politely. Thank you. I don't believe we've met. Sarah Chen Investment Holdings. We specialize in debt acquisition and workout situations. I was particularly interested in your comments about portfolio diversification. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. Sarah never mentioned Pinnacle directly, but she planted seeds about the risks of holding too much debt from companies in volatile industries. She mentioned other banks that had reduced their exposure to certain Seattle-based industrial firms and the regulatory benefits of proactive portfolio management. 2 weeks later, Patricia called. Ms. Chen, we've decided to reduce our exposure to some regional industrial credits. Would you be interested in discussing a potential transaction? Sarah allowed herself a small smile. I'd be very interested. By December, Chen Investment Holdings owned $47 million of Pinnacle Industries. debt nearly a quarter of the company's total obligations. Sarah had paid an average of 78 cents on the dollar, but she now held a position that gave her significant leverage over Marcus Whitmore's empire. The beauty of debt ownership was that it came with rights to financial information, rights to covenant compliance monitoring, rights to declare default under certain circumstances, and Pinnacle Industries was walking a very thin line. Sarah spent her evenings poring over the loan agreements, memorizing every clause in covenant. The company had to maintain certain financial ratios, meet specific reporting requirements, and avoid material adverse changes to its business. Marcus was about to learn that material adverse changes could be ... subjective. At Pinnacle, the Christmas party was a lavish affair held at the Four Seasons. Sarah attended in a simple black dress, playing her role as the reformed employee. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at Marcus's jokes, and accepted congratulations on her growth and improved perspective. "You know, Sarah," Marcus said, pulling her aside near the end of the evening, "I'm proud of how you've handled this transition. It shows real maturity." "Thank you, Marcus. I've learned so much." "Good. I'm thinking about giving you some additional responsibilities in the new year. Nothing dramatic, of course, but a chance to prove you're ready for more." Sarah's smile never wavered. "I appreciate your confidence in me." What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah had already begun implementing the next phase of her plan. Chun Investment Holdings had retained Blackstone Recovery Services to conduct routine compliance monitoring of its debt portfolio. David Kim's team was already scheduling site visits and document reviews. The holidays passed quietly. Sarah spent Christmas with her parents, deflecting their questions about work with vague reassurances that everything was fine. Her mother, a retired accountant, wasn't fooled. "You're planning something," her mother said as they walked through Lincoln Park. "You have that look you used to get before chess tournaments." "I'm just focused on work, Mom." Sarah. Her mother stopped walking and turned to face her. "Your father and I didn't sacrifice everything to put you through Stanford so you could let some arrogant man destroy your career. Whatever you're planning, I hope you destroy him." Sarah hugged her mother tightly. "I love you too, Mom." The first compliance notice arrived at Pinnacle on January 15th. It was a routine request from Blackstone Recovery Services, acting on behalf of an unnamed debt holder, requesting updated financial statements and covenant compliance certifications. Sarah watched from her cubicle as Jim Bradley carried the notice into Marcus's office. Through the glass walls, she could see Marcus's face grow red as he read the document. "Sarah," Marcus's voice boomed across the office. "My office, now." She gathered her notepad and walked calmly to his office, closing the door behind her. "What do you know about this?" Marcus thrust the compliance notice at her. Sarah scanned the document with professional interest. "It appears to be a routine debt compliance request. We get these occasionally from lenders or their agents. I know what it is. I want to know why it's happening now. Probably portfolio review season. A lot of lenders do annual compliance audits in the first quarter." Sarah's voice was perfectly neutral. "Do you want me to coordinate the response?" Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Sarah met his gaze with the calm confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. "Yes," he said finally. "Handle it. And Sarah, I want to know who's behind this." "Of course." Sarah left his office and immediately called David Kim from her desk phone, knowing that Marcus might be monitoring her calls. "Blackstone Recovery Services, this is David. This is Sarah Chen at Pinnacle Industries. We received your compliance request, and I wanted to coordinate our response." "Of course, Ms. Chen. We appreciate your cooperation. How soon can you provide the requested documentation?" "We'll need about 2 weeks to compile everything." "That's acceptable. We'll also need to schedule an on-site review for the following week." Sarah could see Marcus watching from his office, his expression growing darker by the moment. "I understand. I'll coordinate with our facilities team." When she hung up, Marcus was standing beside her desk. "Well, they're representing an institutional investor who recently acquired some of our debts. Apparently, they're required to conduct on-site compliance reviews for positions over a certain threshold." "What threshold?" Sarah pretended to consult her notes. "They didn't specify, but given the extent of their request, I'd guess it's a significant position. Maybe $20 million or more." Marcus's face went pale. $20 million. It's just a guess. They weren't very forthcoming with details. Marcus walked back to his office without another word. Through the glass, Sarah watched him make a series of increasingly agitated phone calls. She knew he was calling his banking contacts, trying to figure out who had sold their debt and to whom. He wouldn't find the answers he was looking for. Sarah had made sure of that. The on-site compliance review was scheduled for the first week of February. David Kim arrived with a team of 3 analysts, all carrying thick briefcases and serious expressions. Sarah met them in the lobby, playing her role as the helpful corporate liaison. "Mr. Kim, welcome to Pinnacle Industries. I'm Sarah Chen, Director of Corporate Development. I'll be coordinating your visit." David shook her hand with professional courtesy, giving no sign that they had spent hours planning this moment. "Thank you, Miss Chen. We appreciate your cooperation." Marcus insisted on attending the initial meeting, flanked by Jim Bradley and the company's general counsel, Robert Hayes. The conference room felt tense, like a courtroom before a verdict. "Gentlemen," Marcus began, "I want to be clear that Pinnacle Industries has always maintained full compliance with all debt covenants. This review is unnecessary." David smiled politely. "I'm sure that's the case, Mr. Whitmore. However, our client has fiduciary obligations that require independent verification. I'm certain you understand. Who is your client?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information. What I can tell you is that they hold a significant position in your debt and have legitimate concerns about certain financial trends." Marcus's jaw tightened. "What trends?" David opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. "Your debt-to-equity ratio has increased by 40% over the past 18 months. Your cash reserves have declined by 25%. And your earnings volatility has increased significantly." Sarah kept her expression neutral, but internally she was impressed. David had done his homework thoroughly. "Those metrics are well within our covenant requirements," Robert Hayes interjected. "Currently, yes," David agreed. "But our client is concerned about trajectory, particularly given recent market conditions in the industrial sector." The meeting continued for 2 hours, with David's team requesting access to financial records, operational reports, and strategic planning documents. Marcus grew increasingly agitated, while Sarah took detailed notes and asked clarifying questions that made her look helpful while actually providing David with additional information. After the meeting, Marcus pulled Sarah aside. "I want you to find out everything you can about this Chen Investment Holdings. Run background checks, financial profiles, the works." "Of course," Sarah said. "I'll start immediately." That afternoon, she prepared a comprehensive report on Chen Investment Holdings, a report that painted the company as a sophisticated institutional investor with a track record of successful debt acquisitions and workout situations. The report was entirely accurate and completely useless for Marcus's purposes. "They're professionals," she told him the next morning. "Institutional debt buyers who specialize in distressed situations, very well funded, very discreet." "Distressed," Marcus's voice cracked slightly on the word. "That's their specialty. They acquire debt from companies that might be facing challenges, then work with management to optimize outcomes. We're not distressed, of course not. They probably acquired our debt as part of a larger portfolio. We might just be incidental to their main strategy." Marcus didn't look convinced, but he had bigger problems to worry about. David's team had uncovered several minor covenant violations, technical infractions that most lenders would have overlooked, but which gave Chen Investment Holdings grounds for concern. The first notice of potential default arrived on February 20th. The notice was clinical in its precision. "Chen Investment Holdings hereby notifies Pinnacle Industries of potential material covenant violations under loan agreement dated March 15, 2019. Section 7.3.2 Minimum Cash Requirements and Section 7.4.1 Maximum Debt-to-Asset Ratio. Borrower has 30 days to cure said violations or provide satisfactory explanation for variance." Sarah delivered the notice to Marcus personally, watching as his hands trembled slightly while reading the document. "This is harassment," he said finally. "It's standard debt administration," Sarah replied. "These covenant violations are technical, but they're real. Our cash position dipped below the required minimum for 6 days last month, and our debt-to-asset ratio exceeded the threshold by 0.3%. No other lender has complained about these ratios. No other lender is looking this closely." Sarah kept her voice sympathetic. "The good news is that both violations are easily curable. We just need to either increase our cash position or restructure some debt." Marcus stared out his office window at the Seattle skyline. How much cash would we need? Sarah consulted her notes. About $8 million to get us comfortably above the minimum threshold. And the debt restructuring option. More complicated, we'd need to renegotiate terms with multiple lenders, which could take months and might trigger cross-default clauses with other creditors. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, I need you to reach out to Chen Investment Holdings directly. See if we can negotiate a modification to these covenants. I can try, but institutional debt buyers are usually pretty rigid about compliance issues. Try anyway. And Sarah, this conversation stays between us. That afternoon, Sarah called David Kim from her personal cell phone. They want to negotiate, she said without preamble. Perfect. What are you thinking? We offer to modify the covenants in exchange for additional security. Maybe a blanket lien on corporate assets. David whistled softly. That would give us significant leverage if they default again. That's the idea. Make it look like we're being reasonable while actually tightening the noose. You're scary when you're focused. You know that. Sarah smiled grimly. Marcus hasn't seen scary yet. The negotiation took place at a neutral location, a law firm's conference room downtown. Marcus brought Jim Bradley and Robert Hayes. Chen Investment Holdings was represented by David Kim and two attorneys Sarah had never seen before. Gentlemen, David began, our client appreciates Pinnacle's willingness to address these covenant issues. However, we need assurance that future violations won't occur. What kind of assurance? Robert Hayes asked. Enhanced security provisions, specifically, a blanket lien on corporate assets and personal guarantees from key management. Mark's face went white. Personal guarantees. That's completely unreasonable. Mr. Whitmore, you're asking us to modify covenant terms on a $47 million debt position. Our client needs protection commensurate with that risk. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. $47 million, nearly a quarter of his company's total debt, concentrated in the hands of a single, unknown creditor. How did you acquire so much of our debt? He asked. David smiled politely. Through various market transactions over the past several months, all completely legal and transparent. I want to know who your client is. That's not possible at this time. The negotiations dragged on for hours. Eventually, they reached a compromise. Chen Investment Holdings would waive the current covenant violations in exchange for enhanced reporting requirements, a lien on specific corporate assets, and personal guarantees from Marcus on 20% of the debt. This is extortion, Marcus muttered as he signed the documents. This is business, David replied. The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. Spring arrived in Seattle with unusual warmth, but the atmosphere at Pinnacle Industries grew colder by the day. The enhanced reporting requirements meant that Chen Investment Holdings received detailed financial reports every 2 weeks, and David Kim's team conducted monthly compliance reviews. Sarah watched Marcus age visibly under the pressure. He had always been controlling, but now he micromanaged every expense, questioned every decision, and snapped at employees over minor issues. The company's morale plummeted, and several key employees began looking for other opportunities. He's destroying the company from the inside, Janet Morrison observed during one of their regular coffee meetings. Maybe we should put him out of his misery. Not yet, Sarah replied. I want him to understand exactly what he did to me, and to everyone else he's crushed over the years. The opportunity came in late April. Pinnacle's largest client, Morrison Industries, Janet's former company, was experiencing financial difficulties of its own. The integration with Pinnacle had been bungled by Jim Bradley, who had alienated key customers and disrupted established supply chains. When Morrison Industries filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, it triggered a material adverse change clause in Pinnacle's debt agreements. Sarah was in Marcus's office when the call came in. What do you mean, material adverse change? Marcus shouted into the phone. Morrison is less than 15% of our revenue, but the debt agreements were clear. The loss of any client representing more than 10% of annual revenue constituted a material adverse change, giving creditors the right to accelerate payment schedules or call the debt entirely. The notice from Chen Investment Holdings arrived the next morning. Chen Investment Holdings hereby exercises its right to accelerate payment of outstanding obligations under the loan agreement dated March 15, 2019. as modified February 28, 2024. Full payment of principal and accrued interest in the amount of $47,832,651 is due within 90 days of this notice. Marcus stared at the document for a full minute without speaking. $47 million, he whispered finally. In 90 days, we could try to refinance, Sarah suggested, or negotiate a payment plan. With what collateral? They already have liens on half our assets. Marcus slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. Sarah, I need you to call them, see if we can work something out. I'll do my best. But Sarah had no intention of working anything out. She had spent 9 months building toward this moment, and she wasn't about to let Marcus Whitmore escape the consequences of his actions. Instead, she began implementing the final phase of her plan. Chen Investment Holdings' offer was simple and devastating. Pinnacle Industries could avoid bankruptcy by selling its assets to Chen Investment Holdings for $45 million, barely enough to cover the accelerated debt payment, with nothing left for shareholders or employees. This is a fire sale, Robert Hayes protested during the emergency board meeting. The company is worth at least $120 million. Not if it's in bankruptcy, David Kim replied calmly. Our forensic accountants estimate that a forced liquidation would yield approximately $30 million after legal fees and administrative costs. Our offer represents a significant premium to that scenario. Marcus looked around the conference table at his board members, successful businessmen who had trusted his leadership for years. Now they were looking at him with expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed anger. There has to be another way, Marcus said. There is, David replied. Pay the debt in full within the remaining 67 days. You know we can't do that. Then, I suggest you seriously consider our offer. We're prepared to retain existing management and preserve current employment levels, with some modifications. What modifications? David consulted his notes. We would need to restructure compensation for certain executives who may have been overpaid relative to their contributions. The words hit Marcus like a slap. Sarah kept her expression carefully neutral, but inside she was savoring every moment. How much time do we have to consider the offer? Board member Elizabeth Carr asked. 48 hours. The next day, Marcus called Sarah into his office. He looked haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his expensive suit wrinkled. Sarah, I need your help. Of course, whatever you need. I've been thinking about what you said months ago, about humility, about learning lessons. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. Maybe I was too harsh with your salary reduction. Sarah waited, saying nothing. I want to restore your full salary, give you a promotion, make you CFO. Even you're the smartest person in this company, and I've been a fool not to recognize that. That's very generous, Marcus. We could fight this together. Find a way to beat these debt collectors at their own game. You understand finance better than anyone. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The view was beautiful from the 42nd floor, the kind of view that made you feel powerful, untouchable. Marcus, she said finally, do you remember what you told me when you cut my salary? Sarah, you said I needed to learn humility, that I was overconfident and entitled. She turned to face him. You said the salary reduction would help me remember my place in the company hierarchy. Marcus's face crumpled as understanding dawned. Sarah, please tell me you didn't. She walked to her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. Chen Investment Holdings is a limited liability company registered in Delaware. Its managing member is Apex Capital Management, which is controlled by Chen Family Trust. Marcus took the documents with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the pages until he found what he was looking for. There, in black and white, was Sarah's name as the beneficiary of Chen Family Trust. You, he whispered, you own the debt. $47,832,651, Sarah confirmed. Plus accrued interest. How you taught me a valuable lesson about humility, Marcus. You showed me that in business, power is the only thing that matters, that the strong take from the weak, and the weak accept it with gratitude. Sarah's voice was calm, almost conversational. So I decided to become strong. Marcus slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him completely. What do you want? I want you to feel exactly what you made me feel. Powerless, humiliated, reduced to begging someone who holds your future in their hands. The board will never approve the sale if they know you're behind this. They don't have a choice. Chen Investment Holdings' offer is the only thing standing between Pinnacle and bankruptcy. And Marcus. Sarah leaned forward. The offer expires in 36 hours. The emergency board meeting the next evening was a somber affair. Marcus sat at the head of the table, his usual commanding presence replaced by the defeated posture of a man who had lost everything. The board has reviewed Chen Investment Holdings' offer, Elizabeth Carr announced. While the terms are challenging, we don't see any viable alternatives. All in favor of accepting the offer, she continued. One by one, the board members raised their hands. Marcus was the last to vote, his hand trembling as he raised it. Motion carries unanimously. David Kim, representing Chen Investment Holdings, was professional and courteous in victory. The transition will begin immediately. We'll honor all existing employment contracts and maintain current operations during the integration period. What about management? Jim Bradley asked, his voice tight with anxiety. There will be some changes, David replied diplomatically. Chen Investment Holdings believes in promoting talent from within whenever possible. After the board members left, only Marcus, Sarah, and David remained in the conference room. I have one question, Marcus said to Sarah. Why didn't you just quit? Find another job. You're talented enough to work anywhere. Sarah considered the question carefully. Because you didn't just cut my salary, Marcus. You tried to break my spirit. You wanted me to accept that I was worth less than a man, that my ideas and achievements didn't matter, that I should be grateful for whatever crumbs you decided to throw me. I never said anything about gender. You didn't have to. How many men have you cut the salary of by 75%? How many male executives have you told needed to learn humility? Marcus had no answer. You picked the wrong woman to underestimate, Sarah continued. And now you're going to spend the rest of your career working for me. Working for you. David smiled. Chen Investment Holdings has decided to retain you as a consultant. Your institutional knowledge of Pinnacle's operations is valuable. The consulting fee will be $45,000 per year. The irony was perfect. Marcus would earn exactly what he had tried to force Sarah to accept. You'll report directly to the new CEO, David added. Marcus looked at Sarah with a mixture of resignation and grudging respect. Let me guess. Sarah's smile was radiant. I start Monday. Sarah's first day as CEO of Pinnacle Industries began at 6 a.m. with a company-wide email. Dear team, I'm honored to serve as Pinnacle's new Chief Executive Officer. Many of you know me from my previous role in corporate development, where I've had the privilege of working alongside you for the past 7 years. Our new ownership brings fresh perspective and resources that will help Pinnacle grow stronger than ever. We'll be making some changes in the coming weeks, but our commitment to excellence and innovation remains unchanged. I look forward to working with each of you to build our company's future together. Sincerely, Sarah Chen, Chief Executive Officer. By 8 a.m., Sarah was in her new office, Marcus's old office, reviewing organizational charts with Janet Morrison, who had agreed to join Pinnacle as Chief Financial Officer. How does it feel? Janet asked, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk. Surreal, Sarah admitted. 10 months ago, I was sitting in that same chair begging Marcus not to destroy my career. And now, Sarah looked out at the Seattle skyline, the view even more beautiful from the CEO's chair. Now we rebuild this company the right way. Their first order of business was addressing the damage Marcus's leadership had caused. Several key clients had grown frustrated with Pinnacle's service under Jim Bradley's management. The Morrison Industries integration had been botched so badly that it would take months to repair those relationships. But Sarah had plans. We're going to do something Marcus never understood, she told her newly assembled leadership team. We're going to listen to our employees. The changes began immediately. Sarah instituted regular town halls where employees could raise concerns directly with leadership. She created cross-functional teams to address operational inefficiencies that had been ignored for years. Most importantly, she established a performance-based compensation system that rewarded results rather than politics. The Old Boys Club is officially closed, she announced at the first leadership meeting. Jim Bradley, relegated to a senior analyst role, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Several other executives who had thrived under Marcus's regime looked equally uncomfortable. Questions? Sarah asked. No one raised a hand. Marcus's first week as a consultant was a masterclass in humiliation. His corner office had been converted to a copy room. His new workspace was a cubicle in the accounting department, the same size cubicle Sarah had been forced to work in after her salary cut. Marcus, Sarah said, stopping by his desk on Friday afternoon. How was your first week? He looked up from the spreadsheet he was reviewing, a mind-numbing analysis of office supply expenses that any junior analyst could have completed in an hour. Educational, he said quietly. Good, I'm glad you're learning. By the way, we need to discuss your performance review process. Performance review, of course. All employees get quarterly reviews. I want to make sure you're meeting expectations. Sarah's smile was perfectly professional. We'll schedule something for next week. I like to be very thorough with performance evaluations. After Sarah walked away, Marcus stared at his computer screen for a long moment. Then, despite everything, he began to laugh, a bitter, defeated sound that drew curious glances from nearby cubicles. He had to admit, he'd taught her well. The annual shareholders' meeting was held on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Marcus had cut Sarah's salary. The conference room was packed with investors, board members, and senior staff, many of the same faces who had witnessed her humiliation 12 months earlier. Sarah stood at the front of the room, confident and composed in a sharp navy suit. Behind her, a presentation screen showed Pinnacle's remarkable financial turnaround. Revenue up 35%, profit margins improved by 12%, and employee satisfaction scores at an all-time high. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, I'm pleased to report that Pinnacle Industries has not only recovered from last year's challenges, but has emerged stronger than ever. In the back of the room, Marcus sat quietly in his cheap suit, the kind of outfit he used to mock other employees for wearing. His consulting contract required him to attend these meetings, though he no longer had voting rights or decision-making authority. Our success this year proves that when you invest in people, listen to their ideas, and compensate them fairly, extraordinary things happen, Sarah continued, her eyes briefly meeting Marcus's across the room. Talent should be rewarded, not punished. Confidence should be encouraged, not crushed. And humility should be earned through wisdom, not forced through humiliation. The applause was thunderous. Board members who had once sided with Marcus now beamed with pride at their new CEO's leadership. After the meeting, Sarah found Marcus in the hallway, loosening his tie with the weary gesture of someone who had learned what it meant to work for a living. Marcus, she said quietly. He turned, his face showing a mixture of exhaustion and something that might have been respect. That was a good presentation, he said. You've done well. Thank you. Sarah paused. I have something for you. She handed him a check. His eyes widened as he read the amount. $2.3 million. What's this? Your severance package. I'm terminating your consulting contract. Marcus stared at the check, confused. I don't understand. After everything, ... After everything, you're still a human being who deserves to retire with dignity, Sarah said. You taught me that power without mercy is just cruelty. I won't make that mistake. For the first time in months, Marcus's shoulders straightened slightly. Sarah, you were wrong about me needing to learn humility, she interrupted, but you were right about one thing. I did need to learn what it felt like to be powerless, because now I know I never want to make anyone else feel that way. Marcus nodded slowly, pocketing the check. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what I did to you. No, I didn't. But it made me who I am now. Sarah extended her hand. Good luck, Marcus. He shook it, his grip firm for the first time in months. Take care of the company. It's in good hands. As Marcus walked away, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The anger that had driven her for the past year was finally gone, replaced by something better. The satisfaction of knowing she had built something lasting from the ashes of her humiliation. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. Mom, it's over. I won. How do you feel, sweetheart? Sarah looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, the city sparkling in the afternoon sun. I feel free. 2 years later, Sarah Chen was named one of Forbes' 30 Under 30 business leaders. The article mentioned her remarkable turnaround of Pinnacle Industries, but never revealed the full story of how she had transformed personal betrayal into professional triumph. Marcus Whitmore retired quietly to a small coastal town in Oregon, where he spent his days fishing and reading business magazines. He never spoke publicly about his time at Pinnacle. But friends noticed he was more thoughtful, more humble, and surprisingly, more at peace than he had been in years. And in Seattle, Sarah continued to lead Pinnacle Industries with the hard-won wisdom that true power comes not from crushing others, but from lifting them up. The lesson in humility had been learned by everyone involved. What did you think of this thrilling journey? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest tales. What kind of story would you like to hear next?